I caught him staring again, this time not just glancing, but fully fixated. His eyes were low, hungry, unashamed. George wasn't even pretending anymore. I stood in the hallway of my Los Angeles home, fresh from the shower, the morning sunlight cutting across my chest. He lingered at the bottom of the stairs, phone in hand as though scrolling, but I knew better. I should have turned away, maybe covered myself, but instead, I let him look. My heart raced, not with fear but with a strange rush of power. George had been watching me like this for weeks, and until that day, I had never let him know that I noticed. But something inside me wondered what would happen if I allowed it, if I gave him something to truly see. What unfolded between us would reach far beyond curiosity or lust, it would cost me more than I ever expected. George wasn't a stranger, he was my best friend Evelyn's younger brother, 5 years my junior, newly divorced, and trying to put his life back together. He had moved into our basement a couple of months earlier. My husband, Robert, barely paid attention to his presence, he was too absorbed in work, the markets, and his hours in the garage. Between Robert and me, intimacy had withered. He hadn't touched me in 7 months, and when he dismissed me with tired excuses, I stopped asking. Silence became our routine. George, on the other hand, started off respectful. Maybe too respectful. Then came little moments, a compliment about my hair, holding my gaze a fraction too long, and of course, the stares when Robert wasn't around. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I felt it, that forgotten thrill of being wanted. One night, wrapped in nothing but a towel after a long bath, I lingered by the mirror. George appeared in the doorway, pretending to sip from his cup. I felt his breathing shift, noticed his grip tightening. When I turned slowly and caught him watching, I smiled. He looked away instantly, embarrassed but not ashamed. There was something else in his eyes that told me the truth, he wanted more than a glance. And in that moment, I realized I had opened a door neither of us would easily close. Being truly seen can be dangerously addictive. Not just noticed, but seen, and George looked at me as if I was the only woman left in the world. After that morning in the hallway, everything between us changed. I began to test the limits. Tighter shorts, a silk robe that slipped open too easily, bending just a little too slowly when I knew he was near. Each time, I could feel his hesitation, his hunger. It became a silent game, a slow burning dance neither of us admitted to playing, until one evening when I pushed it too far. Robert was, as always, working late. The sun had set behind the trees, the kitchen bathed in a soft amber glow. That was the night everything shifted. I stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, dressed in a fitted white tank top without a bra and low-rise lounge pants that clung just enough to show my shape. George came upstairs, claiming he needed foil for leftovers, but I knew better. He could have asked me to bring it down. Instead, he lingered, leaning against the fridge while I pretended to rummage through the drawers. I arched my back slightly as I reached into a cabinet, fully aware of his silent gaze burning into me. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. When I finally turned to face him, his eyes dropped before he could stop them, drawn straight to my chest. A faint flush crept up his neck, and when he realized I had caught him, I stepped closer, just enough to close the distance. "Did you find the foil?" I asked softly. He nodded but didn't speak. His eyes met mine and this time, he didn't look away. There was something raw in his expression, desire, restraint, desperation, all fighting for control. His jaw tightened as he stepped forward, his hand lifting as if to touch me, then freezing midair. For a long second, his fingers hovered, then slowly pulled back. "I should go," he said, his voice low and hoarse. He turned and walked away, not in a rush, not in panic, more like a man forcing himself to leave before crossing a line. And the worst part was, I wanted him to stay. That night, guilt hit me hard. I lay in bed next to Robert, who snored softly, blissfully unaware. I stared up at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. What was I doing? I was a married woman with vows, a home, a life I had built. But none of it seemed to matter when George looked at me the way he did. The next day, I tried to avoid him. I needed space, time to clear my head. But fate, or something darker, had other plans. That evening, a storm rolled in. Rain pounded against the windows, wind howled through the trees, and the lights flickered once or twice. I remembered George mentioning a dripping sound in the basement earlier that week, so I pulled on a hoodie, nothing revealing this time, and went downstairs to check. I went down to the basement and found him there, shirtless, sweat glistening on his skin, throwing punches at the bag he'd hung in the corner. His chest rose and fell with every breath, muscles flexing with each movement. He stopped the moment he saw me. "Is everything okay?" he asked, grabbing a towel to wipe his neck. I nodded, explaining I was just checking for leaks. Silence settled between us, and I began to turn away, but then he called my name, Katie. I froze. He stepped closer, slowly, and I could feel the heat of his body near mine. "I don't want to disrespect you," he whispered, almost inaudible, "but I can't stop thinking about you, about what you're doing to me." I turned to face him. Our eyes locked, and something inside me snapped. The restraint, the fear, all of it vanished. In that dim light, the line between right and wrong blurred. Even as we pressed together, one terrifying truth echoed in my mind. We had crossed the line, and there was no going back. That night in the basement wasn't a one-time mistake. It became 2, then 3, then 5 nights. I lost count. Whenever Robert was away, late for work, off on trips, tied up in meetings, George appeared. Sometimes it started innocently. A movie, a drink, a lingering touch. But it always escalated, always ending with a passionate kiss that led me to his room before sunrise. I would slip out just as the birds began to sing. Every encounter felt more dangerous, more addictive, like fire pressed to dry leaves. It was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. And then it did. One afternoon, I entered the laundry room to fold towels, still flushed from an earlier encounter with George. My lips still tingled from our kiss, my body still humming. I thought I had time, but something was wrong. Robert was home early, sitting at the kitchen table, briefcase on the floor, his face blank, too blank. "Where were you?" he asked, not even looking up. I froze. "Laundry," I said weakly. He lifted his eyes to meet mine, and the cold emptiness there made my blood run ice. "I saw you," he said slowly, each word striking me like a blow. "I came home early. I saw you come out of his room, zipping up your pants." My knees nearly buckled, and I grabbed the counter to stay upright. I opened my mouth to speak, but he raised a hand. "Don't, just don't," he said, his voice breaking on the last word. I caught him staring again, not just a glance, but a full, fixated stare. His eyes were low, hungry, unashamed. George wasn't pretending anymore. I stood in the hallway of my Los Angeles home, fresh from a morning shower, the sunlight cutting across my chest. He lingered at the bottom of the stairs, phone in hand, pretending to scroll, but I knew better. I should have turned away, but instead I let him look. My heart raced, not with fear but with a rush of power. George had been watching me like this for weeks, and until that day, I had never let him know. But something inside me wanted to see what would happen if I allowed it. What followed wasn't just lust, it went deeper, and it cost me something I would never get back. George was my best friend Evelyn's younger brother, 5 years my junior, charming, polite, and newly divorced. He had moved into our basement a couple of months earlier, trying to get back on his feet. My husband, Robert, barely noticed him. He was always absorbed in work, the stock market, or quiet hours in the garage. He hadn't touched me in 7 months, claiming he was too tired, and I had stopped asking. Silence had become our routine. George had started off overly respectful, but little moments began slipping through, a compliment about my hair, holding his gaze a second too long, lingering stares when Robert wasn't around. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I felt it, that spark, that thrill I thought was gone. One night, after a long bath, I stood in front of the mirror wrapped only in a towel. I knew he was in the doorway. I pretended not to notice, but I did. His breathing changed, hands clenched around his cup. When I turned slowly and caught his eyes on me, I smiled. He looked away instantly, embarrassed but not ashamed. There was something else in his eyes, a desire I hadn't anticipated. At that moment, I realized I had opened a door neither of us would know how to close. Being truly seen can be dangerously addictive, and George looked at me as if I were the only woman left in the world. After that morning, everything changed. I began testing limits, a pair of shorts a little tighter than usual, a silk robe that slipped just enough, bending slowly when he was around. I could feel his stare, his hesitation, his hunger. It became a silent, slow-burning game. Neither of us admitted it until one evening, when I pushed it too far. Robert was working late again. The kitchen lights cast a soft amber glow, and I stood barefoot on the tile in a fitted white tank top and low-rise lounge pants. George came upstairs, ostensibly for foil, but I knew better. He lingered, leaning against the fridge while I pretended to search drawers. I arched slightly as I reached into a cabinet, aware of his silent gaze. My heart pounded. I finally turned to face him. His eyes dropped immediately to my chest. A flush rose up his neck. When he realized I saw, I stepped closer, just enough. "Did you find the foil?" I whispered. He nodded but didn't speak. His eyes stayed locked on mine, dark, desperate, barely controlled. He wanted me, and I saw it all in his expression. His jaw tensed, his hand lifted as if to touch me, then froze midair before pulling back. "I should go," he said, voice tight and hoarse. He left slowly, and the worst part, I wanted him to stay. That night, guilt hit me hard. I lay beside Robert, snoring lightly, unaware, and stared at the ceiling. What was I doing? I had vows, a home, a life, but none of it seemed to matter when George looked at me like that. I avoided him the next day, trying to clear my head. But fate, or something darker, had other plans. A storm rolled in that night, wind rattling windows, rain pounding, lights flickering. Remembering George mentioning a dripping sound in the basement, I grabbed a hoodie and went to check. He was there, shirtless, sweat glistening, throwing punches at his bag. His chest rose and fell, muscles taut. He stopped when he saw me. "Is everything okay?" he asked, grabbing a towel. I nodded, just checking for leaks. Silence fell. I turned to leave, but he called my name. I froze. He stepped closer, heat radiating from him. "I don't want to disrespect you," he whispered, "but I can't stop thinking about you, about what you're doing to me." I faced him. Our eyes locked, and something in me snapped. The restraint, the fear, all vanished. Even as our bodies pressed together in the dim light, I knew we had crossed a line, one with no turning back. That night became 2, then 3, then 5. I lost count. Whenever Robert was gone, George would appear. Sometimes it started innocently, a movie, a drink, a lingering touch, but it always escalated, ending with a passionate kiss that led me to his room before sunrise. Each time was more dangerous, more addictive, like fire against dry leaves. And then it happened. I walked into the laundry room, body still humming, lips still swollen from an encounter, only to see Robert home early, sitting at the kitchen table. His face was blank, too blank. "Where were you?" he asked. "Laundry," I said weakly. He looked at me with cold emptiness. "I saw you. I came home early. I saw you come out of his room, zipping up your pants." My knees nearly gave out, and I grabbed the counter to stay upright. Ron, I started, but he raised a hand. "Don't, just don't," he said, voice cracking. I hadn't heard emotion from him in months, maybe years, but now it poured out, betrayal, rage, hurt. I tried to explain, to tell him how invisible I had felt, how lonely, but it didn't matter. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. That night, Robert packed a bag and left. He didn't shout, didn't slam doors, he just walked out. George didn't come upstairs for 2 days. When he finally did, I confronted him, numb and hollow. "Do you even care?" I asked. He looked guilty, but not devastated. "I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to ruin your life," he said. And I realized then, it was never love. It was lust, escape, a fantasy acted out in real time. I had been foolish to believe it could be more. He moved out the following week, saying it was best. No apologies, no promises, just silence. 6 months later, Robert and I remained separated. No calls, no counseling, just cold distance. Sometimes I sit in the kitchen late at night, thinking about that morning when I let George look, wondering, if I had turned away, would any of this have happened? If I had fought for my marriage, would we still be whole? I can't go back. I can only sit with the lesson. Sometimes being seen isn't the same as being loved, and what feels like freedom can also be a trap. If this story resonated with you, give it a like and make sure to subscribe for more true stories like this. Your support helps keep these stories coming. This story is for entertainment purposes only. Names and details have been changed to protect privacy. The events described are dramatized for storytelling.